Why is it that at 2 p.m. you can function perfectly, but by 2:09 a.m. your brain is dissecting a sentence you said 3 years ago? There is a biological reason for that loop, and it's not anxiety. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with how many hours you slept last night. It's a mental fatigue that comes from living in a world that seems content with the surface, while your brain is constantly, involuntarily diving for the bottom. If you have ever stood in a crowded room, holding a plastic cup, listening to someone talk about their kitchen renovation, and felt a physical wave of loneliness hit you, not because you are alone, but because the interaction feels so painfully hollow, then this video is going to explain your entire life. You aren't difficult, you aren't oversensitive, and despite what your insomnia might tell you, you aren't broken. You possess a distinct psychological architecture. Researchers call it high trait introspection, or in some circles, depth processing. But understanding the label isn't enough. We need to look at the mechanics. Today, we are going to disassemble the engine of the deep thinker. We are going to look at why your brain lights up differently during silence, why you can predict relationship endings before they start, and how to stop drowning in your own depth so you can finally learn to float. Let's start with the architecture of your reality. For most people, a conversation is just a transfer of information. Pass the salt. Did you see the game? Nice weather. It is functional. It is linear. But for you, a single moment is an entire universe of thought. You don't just hear the words. You hear the timbre of the voice. You see the micro expression that flickers across a face for a millisecond before the smile lands. You notice the way someone shifts their weight when they are lying to themselves. This is the first burden of the deep thinker, the inability to filter out the subtext. Psychologically speaking, this is linked to a brain region called the default mode network. In the average brain, this network quiets down when focusing on a task. In your brain, it is running a marathon. It is the network responsible for memory, for imagination, and for that relentless scanning for meaning. When others are simply reacting to the moment, you are observing it. You are cross-referencing the current moment with a memory from 10 years ago, analyzing the emotional temperature of the room, and predicting the outcome of the interaction, all while trying to remember to nod at the right time. It is efficient, but it is isolating, because by the time you have processed all that data and formulated a response that actually means something, the conversation has already moved on. So, you stay silent. And here is the tragedy. People mistake that silence for disinterest. They think you are judging them, or that you are bored, or that you are shy. They don't realize that your silence isn't an absence of thought. It is an overflow of it. You don't speak because you are weighing 10 different possibilities at once. But why does this happen? Why can't you just relax and enjoy the small talk? It comes down to a concept called depth processing. Imagine the mind is a filing cabinet. Most people file experiences under broad categories: fun, boring, work. You don't just file the experience. You encode it. You file it with rich meaning, emotional associations, smell, texture, and tone. You don't just remember that you went to dinner. You remember the feeling of the heavy silverware, the tension in your partner's jaw, the specific shade of melancholy in the background music. This is why nostalgia hits you harder than anyone else. You aren't just remembering a moment. You are transporting back into an ecosystem of feeling. This brings us to the double-edged sword of your personality. It is a term called meta-cognition. Simply put, this is thinking about your thinking. Most people do this occasionally, usually when they make a mistake. Why did I do that? But you live there. You are constantly watching your own thoughts from the outside, like a director watching a movie of your own life. This makes you incredibly self-aware, which is a gift. But the shadow side of self-awareness is self-doubt. When you are aware of everything, you are also aware of every single one of your flaws in high definition. You don't just ask, what do I want for dinner? You ask, why do I want that? Is it because I'm actually hungry, or am I trying to soothe a specific anxiety with comfort food? And where did that anxiety come from? You analyze your ambition, your love, your fear, until you can hold these invisible concepts in your hands. But in doing so, you often lose the ability to just be. You treat your life like a puzzle to be solved rather than an experience to be felt. And this leads to the loop. You know the one. You replay an event. You dissect a sentence. Maybe they meant this. What if I had said that? Your brain becomes a loop of what ifs because you see nuance everywhere. To a deep thinker, nothing is ever just black and white. Every choice has a dozen meanings. Ordinary overthinking is usually just worrying about the future. But what you do is different. You engage in existential thinking. You aren't just worried about paying the bills. You are worried about the nature of time, the validity of your purpose, and the moral implications of your existence. It is the difference between anxiety and awareness. But to the outside world, it just looks like you're staring at the wall. If this distinction between worrying and analyzing reality resonates with you, take a second to like this video. It helps us find other deep thinkers who are currently overanalyzing why they haven't found a community yet. Now, let's talk about the pain point that probably hurts the most: connection. There is a profound loneliness in being a deep thinker, but it is a specific kind of loneliness. You don't crave a crowd. You don't need people around you. You crave resonance. You are desperate for a conversation that dives below the how are yous and into the architecture of the human heart. You want to talk about fears, dreams, the things that keep people awake at night. Surface level chatter feels physically exhausting to you because while most people are swimming in the shallows, you are trying to dive for pearls on the ocean floor. So, what happens? You learn to mask. You learn to hide your depth to fit into a world that moves faster than you do. You nod along. You smile politely. You suppress the urge to ask, but are you happy? And instead, you ask, how was your weekend? And this is dangerous because when you wear a mask for too long, you start to forget what your own face feels like. You become a chameleon, observing quietly, waiting for someone, anyone, to show a sign of depth so you can finally open the door. And when you do find that person, when you find someone who speaks your language, you don't just open the door, you take it off the hinges. Deep thinkers do not do halfway hearts. You are either all in or you are invisible. You tell them your fears, your hopes, the things you don't even say out loud to yourself. But this vulnerability backfires because you assume that everyone operates with your level of integrity and depth. You assume that if someone says forever, they have analyzed the weight of that word as much as you have, but they haven't. And when reality doesn't align with that expectation, the crash is devastating. To a deep thinker, a small betrayal feels cosmic. A shift in tone feels like a breakup because you haven't just invested time, you have invested meaning. However, this sensitivity is also your greatest superpower if you learn how to wield it. You are a detective of emotion. Because you are constantly reading emotional data, you can sense when something is wrong long before anyone else does. You notice the inconsistency. You see how people project what they can't accept in themselves. You see the hidden structure behind social dynamics, how fear disguises itself as anger, how arrogance is just a costume for insecurity. This makes you a bridge. You have the rare ability to connect logic with empathy. You can analyze a problem with the precision of a surgeon, but you can hold the people involved with the compassion of a saint. You forgive easily, not because you are a pushover, but because you understand the why. You see people not as good or bad, but as complex stories shaped by invisible battles. You understand that the person yelling at you isn't angry at you. They are fighting a war inside themselves that started 20 years ago. But to maintain this superpower, you have a requirement that irritates the people around you: solitude. For you, solitude is not a luxury. It is a medical necessity. Your brain is like a sponge that absorbs everything: the mood of the room, the stress of your partner, the chaotic energy of the news. You pick up energy that isn't yours. If you don't wring that sponge out, you drown. You need space to breathe, to process, to untangle thoughts that others don't even know exist. When you put your headphones in and walk alone, you aren't being antisocial. You are running a system update. You are letting the sediment settle so the water can become clear again. In that silence, the mental noise finally stops. And make no mistake, your mind is noisy. It is like standing in front of 10 radio stations playing at once. Without silence, you cannot hear your own intuition. We are diving into the final, most crucial part of this psychology: how to stop the spiral. But before we do, if you have a friend or partner who never understands why you need so much alone time, share this video with them. It might explain what you haven't been able to articulate. Now, we have to talk about the danger zone. The paralysis of insight. Because your mind is a pattern recognition machine, you are at risk of finding patterns that aren't there. You can connect anything to anything. You might read too much into a silence. You might assume a text message lacks warmth and spiral into a narrative that they are losing interest, when in reality, they were just in a rush. It is like having a microscope that is too powerful. You start seeing the bacteria on the flower petals, and you forget that the flower is beautiful. You can analyze love until it feels mechanical. You can study fear until it becomes predictable. You can know so much about an emotion that you forget to actually feel it. This is the intellectual defense mechanism. It is safer to dissect life than to live it. It is safer to be the observer than the participant. But the most difficult lesson for a deep thinker is learning when to stop thinking. So, what is the solution? How do you live with a mind that wants to drill to the center of the earth in a world that is happy playing in the dirt? You have to realize that peace is not found in the answers. It is found in the presence. The same mind that searches for truth eventually learns that some things are not meant to be understood. They are meant to be felt. You have to learn to anchor yourself. This is why deep thinkers are often drawn to art, writing, or music. These are not hobbies for you. They are translation devices. They allow you to take the chaos inside your head and turn it into something tangible. Without expression, your thoughts become heavy. With expression, they become light. You also need to accept that you will likely always feel a little bit like an outsider, and that is okay. You were not made to fit in. You were made to see through. You are here to remind the world that life isn't meant to be skimmed. You are here to slow the world down, to remind people that mystery has beauty, that silence is sacred, and that asking why is the highest form of love. If you are a deep thinker, stop apologizing for your silence. Stop shrinking your thoughts to fit into smaller conversations. The world needs minds like yours. It needs people who can find meaning in the mundane. It needs people who can turn chaos into clarity. Your depth is not a burden. In a shallow world, depth is its own kind of light. If you found yourself nodding through this, you are part of a very specific tribe. We cover the psychology of the human mind every week here. So, click that subscribe button if you want to understand yourself a little better. And if you're feeling stuck in that analysis paralysis we talked about, I want you to watch this video next. It's about how to break the loop of overthinking without losing your edge. I'll see you there.